You know when you get that uneasy feeling that something is wrong, but you just can't figure out exactly what it is? That was precisely how I felt while walking up the steps to my daughter Rebecca's house on that freezing December afternoon. At 58 years old, after a painful divorce that forced me to rebuild my entire life from the ground up, I had finally managed to create a modest yet peaceful routine. I worked as a nurse at Riverside Regional Hospital, lived in a small one-bedroom apartment that comfortably fit my budget, and the greatest joy in my life was being able to support my only daughter whenever she needed me. Rebecca opened the front door wearing that familiar half-hearted smile I had sadly grown used to during the 4 years since she married David. "Hi, Mom. Come in. I've been waiting for you." The house looked flawless, just like always, filled with luxurious furniture that I knew very well I had helped finance. David was sitting in the living room, distracted by his newest expensive phone, and barely acknowledged me when I walked inside. "So, about Christmas," I started cheerfully while sitting down on the Italian leather sofa that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. "I was thinking about making my special apple pie, the one you loved so much when you were little. Remember how we used to bake it together? You'd end up covered in cinnamon and flour and—" "Mom," Rebecca interrupted, and something in her voice immediately made my stomach twist with anxiety. "About that, there's something I need to tell you." She glanced nervously toward David, who finally set his phone aside and walked over, standing behind her chair almost like a silent protector. "What is it, sweetheart?" I asked, trying my best to stay calm, even though deep inside, I already sensed I wouldn't like what was coming. "This Christmas is going to be different," she said carefully. "David's parents are coming from Connecticut, and we're planning a more formal dinner this year. Something more elegant and sophisticated, you know?" She avoided eye contact while absent-mindedly playing with the diamond ring I had partially paid for. "That's okay," I replied quickly. "I can prepare something fancier too. Or I could just bring a few dishes and help in the kitchen. You know I enjoy." "No, Mom." This time her voice sounded firmer, colder. "What I'm trying to say is, it would probably be better if you didn't come this year." The words lingered in the room like poison in the air. I blinked several times, struggling to fully understand what I had just heard. "What do you mean, not come?" I asked quietly. "Rebecca, it's Christmas. We've always spent Christmas together." David cleared his throat and stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson, what Rebecca is trying to explain is that my parents have certain expectations regarding family gatherings. They come from a very traditional and particular background. Traditions that apparently don't include me." I answered bitterly. "It's not personal," Rebecca said quickly, although the way she spoke made it obvious that it was entirely personal. "They're just not really used to your type of lifestyle." "My type of lifestyle?" I repeated in disbelief. "I worked 60 hours every week caring for sick people, continued paying many of my daughter's expenses for 4 years, and somehow my lifestyle was now considered inappropriate for my son-in-law's wealthy family." I slowly stood up, suddenly feeling every one of my 58 years pressing heavily on my shoulders. "I understand. My life as a hardworking nurse from a humble background clearly doesn't fit the standards of David's sophisticated family." "Mom, you don't have to make this dramatic," Rebecca muttered. "Dramatic?" I laughed softly, though nothing about the situation was amusing. "Rebecca, I raised you alone after your father walked out on us. I worked 2 jobs to make sure you had a good education, so you could attend college, build a better future, and meet men like David. And now you're telling me that who I am isn't good enough for my own daughter's Christmas dinner." David stepped even closer, and for the first time since I had known him, he spoke to me without pretending to be polite. "Look, Mrs. Thompson, I'll be honest. My parents expect a certain social standard. They don't really understand why someone working as a nurse would attend a dinner with executives and highly successful people. It creates discomfort for everyone involved." The silence afterward was unbearable. Rebecca didn't defend me. She didn't remind him that I was her mother, that I deserved respect, or that without my sacrifices she would never have a life she had now. Instead, she stayed quiet in her chair, shrinking into herself like a frightened child unwilling to take part in an argument between adults. "Executives and successful people," I repeated slowly. "I see. So the woman who spends her days saving lives comforting families during their worst moments, and financially helping support this household somehow isn't considered successful enough. That's not what I mean, Mom, Rebecca finally whispered weakly, though there was no conviction in her voice. Conviction? No. Then explain it to me, Rebecca, I said, struggling to control the pain in my voice. Because I honestly don't understand how the woman who raised you supported you, and still, I stopped myself before mentioning the money. Something deep inside warned me not to use that argument yet. David folded his arms across his chest. Honestly, Mrs. Thompson, Rebecca's father, was a respected man in the community. He was a successful lawyer who owned a home in the best neighborhood in the city. Rebecca grew up with certain expectations regarding how life should look. My parents expect to socialize with people from a similar social class. I stared at him in disbelief. My ex-husband? The man who abandoned us when Rebecca was only 12 years old? That's your definition of success. My voice was getting louder now, and I noticed movement behind the curtains of nearby houses as neighbors leaned closer to their windows to hear better. At least he had class, David replied coldly, and the words hit me like a slap across the face. Rebecca remained silent. My daughter, the little girl I once held in my arms while she cried herself to sleep because she missed her father. The same child I comforted after classmates made fun of her second-hand clothes. The young woman I encouraged to study hard so she could have opportunities one never had. Now she sat there quietly, silently agreeing that I lacked enough class to sit beside her wealthy in-laws. Understand perfectly, I finally said as I picked up my purse. Thank you for making everything so clear. Truly, thank you. Mom, don't leave upset, Rebecca said quickly. We can talk after the holidays. Maybe spend some time together, just the two of us. She finally stood up, but by then I was already opening the front door. Of course, sweetheart, I answered bitterly. After all the successful executives are gone, you can always call the woman without class whenever you need help again. I stepped outside, and the freezing December air burned against my skin. Have a wonderful Christmas, I said quietly. You deserve exactly the holiday you wanted. I walked away without turning around, but before the door closed completely, I heard David murmur to Rebecca, this was for the best. She understood. Yes, I understood perfectly. Back in my apartment, the small one-bedroom space had never felt both so tiny and so comforting at the same time. It belonged to me. Every inch of it had been earned through years of hard work, without anyone criticizing me for lacking sophistication or social status. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the familiar blue folder where I carefully stored all my bank statements. For entire years since Rebecca married David and I began helping them financially with their new life together. I grabbed my old calculator, the same reliable one that still worked perfectly despite not being modern or luxurious like everything inside Rebecca's house, and started going through the numbers. January 2021, $2,800 for the down payment on the house. Just a little help, Mom. We'll handle the rest. February, $1,500 because David was temporarily unemployed. March, another $1,500, plus an extra $800 for a supposed car emergency. April, May, June. Every month there was another request. At minimum $1,500, sometimes far more. My fingers moved rapidly across the calculator while my heart pounded harder with every total. $2,000 here, $3,000 there. The month they decided to replace all the living room furniture, $4,500. The delayed honeymoon, $5,000. It's only temporary, Mom. We'll pay you back once David gets promoted. The promotion eventually came, but then suddenly they needed to maintain appearances for his new position. Expensive clothes, designer accessories. That silver 2023 sedan sitting proudly in their garage. When I finally finished adding everything together, I stared silently at the calculator screen for nearly 5 full minutes. $123,450. And that was only the money I could clearly track through direct transfers in my bank statements. It didn't include costly birthday presents, restaurant bills I covered whenever we ate out together, or the expensive clothes I bought for Rebecca so she could look elegant at David's corporate events. $123,000. Do you know how much money remained in my personal savings account? $1,200. Do you know where I'd spent my last 3 vacations? Nowhere. Do you know the last time I bought new clothes for myself? I honestly couldn't remember. I picked up my latest bank statement and noticed the line that had become so routine I barely thought about it anymore. Monthly automatic transfer, Rebecca Thompson Miller, $2,100. Every single month without fail. The money automatically left my account on the 5th day of each month, like clockwork. It had become as normal to me as paying electricity or phone bills, just another permanent expense in my life. And that same daughter had just told me I didn't have enough class to sit at the Christmas table inside the very house I was helping finance. I slowly walked toward the refrigerator. Attached to it with a butterfly magnet Rebecca had given me for Mother's Day 3 years earlier was the small card containing all the banking information for the automatic transfers. I picked up my phone and dialed the bank. Good morning, National Bank. This is Jennifer speaking. How may I assist you today? Hello, Jennifer, I replied calmly. I need to cancel an automatic transfer connected to my account. Of course, she answered politely. I'd be happy to help you with that. I'll just need to verify a few details first. 10 minutes later, everything was finished. The automatic transfer of $2,100 that had been leaving my account every 5th day of the month and going directly into my daughter's account had officially been canceled. 4 years, 4 months, and 17 days after I first created it, believing I was helping my daughter build a stable married life. Is there anything else I can assist you with today, Mrs. Thompson? Jennifer asked politely. Actually, yes, I replied after a brief pause. Are there any other recurring transfers connected to that same account? I heard her typing for a moment before she answered. Yes, I see another transfer here for $300 scheduled every 15th. It's labeled, let me check, Rebecca's car. Cancel that one too, please. Done. Anything else? That's all. Thank you, Jennifer. I ended the call and stood silently in the middle of my kitchen, still holding the phone tightly in my hand. It was done. After 4 long years, I had finally severed the financial cord tying my bank account to my daughter's expensive lifestyle. And do you know what I felt? Relief. For the first time in years, it felt as though an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Every month, $2,400 would now remain in my own account instead of disappearing into Rebecca's life. Money I could finally use for myself. Money I could save for retirement. Money I could keep without constantly worrying whether I'd still have enough left to cover both my bills and my adult daughter's endless expenses. I gathered the scattered bank statement from a kitchen table and carried them to the paper shredder I almost never used. One by one, I fed each page into the machine. The sound was strangely satisfying, as though I was destroying 4 years of manipulation and sacrifice sheet by sheet. When the last page disappeared into the shredder, I reached into the cabinet for the wine glass I normally saved only for special occasions and poured myself a generous serving. Standing alone in my tiny kitchen, I lifted the glass in a quiet toast. Merry Christmas to me. For the first time in 4 years, I was going to spend an entire December without worrying about whether I had enough money to cover both my own expenses and Rebecca's. I could finally buy something for myself. I could start dreaming about taking a vacation someday. I could look at my bank balance without immediately feeling anxiety tightening in my chest. My daughter had decided I wasn't welcome at Christmas because I supposedly lacked class. Fine. Now she was going to discover exactly how expensive class really was once the money from her so-called classless mother stopped appearing in her account every month. I finished my wine and went to bed feeling more peaceful than I had in a very long time. The next morning would mark the beginning of a completely different life. A life where my purpose was no longer to finance people who were ashamed of me. And honestly, I was curious to see what that life would feel like. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was enjoying a quiet afternoon off from work, curled up on the couch watching an old movie on Netflix. It was Rebecca, and judging by the sharp tone in her voice, I immediately knew she wasn't calling to ask how I was doing. Mom, I need you to do something for me today. It wasn't a request. It was a command. After 4 years of hearing that tone from her, I was only now beginning to realize how much she had changed after marrying David. "What is it, Rebecca?" I asked calmly. "Can you go to the shopping center today? I need presents for David's parents. Nice gifts, obviously. They're arriving tomorrow, and I won't have time to shop." Boulevard Shopping Center, the most expensive mall in the city, where even a simple blouse cost more than 2 full days of my salary. "Why can't you go yourself?" I asked. "Mom, I have meetings at the office all day. After that, I need to go to the salon and get my hair done before tomorrow. Can you just handle this for me? It's important for her." Everything in Rebecca's world was always important. My exhausting double shifts at the hospital to help pay her bills? Apparently not important. My health, my exhaustion, my little bit of free time? None of that mattered. But buying expensive gifts for the wealthy in-laws who believed I was too embarrassing to sit at their Christmas table? That was considered urgent. "What kind of gifts?" I asked. "Something elegant for Mrs. Miller. Maybe an Italian leather handbag or a French silk scarf. Somewhere between $300 and $500. And for Mr. Miller, maybe a nice bottle of Scottish whiskey or a designer tie. You know, the type of thing they'd appreciate. $300 to $500 for each gift. For people who viewed me as beneath them. And how exactly am I supposed to pay for all of this, Rebecca?" "Oh, Mom," she said impatiently. "Just use your credit card and we'll figure it out afterward. Like we always do. Like we always do." Those words carried years of meaning. Like we always do meant I paid for everything and never got reimbursed. Like we always do meant my credit card would once again finance luxury items for people who openly looked down on me. "Okay," I answered quietly, surprised by the calmness in my own voice. "I'll go to the mall today." "Thank you, Mom. You're an angel," she said immediately. "Oh, and pick up some beautiful flowers, too. I want to give Mrs. Miller white orchids when they arrive, if you can find some." An angel. I was an angel whenever she needed money, favors, or help. But when Christmas arrived, suddenly I became an embarrassment. "Leave everything to me, sweetheart," I replied softly. 2 hours later, I arrived at Boulevard Shopping Center. But instead of walking into the expensive luxury boutiques Rebecca had suggested, I headed somewhere completely different. I walked directly toward the department store located at the far end of the mall corridor, the one famous for constant discounts and clearance sales. I spent nearly an hour carefully selecting each item. For Mrs. Miller, I chose a brown synthetic leather handbag that cost $45. If you didn't inspect it too closely, it actually resembled genuine leather, and it even had a charming vintage appearance. For Mr. Miller, I found a dark navy tie with tiny polka dots for $19.99. Conservative, subtle, and perfectly suitable for a businessman. The flowers were the easiest part. Instead of the expensive white orchids Rebecca had specifically requested, I bought a cheerful arrangement of yellow chrysanthemums for $22. They were beautiful, long-lasting, and bright. The total came to exactly $87.99. I wrapped everything carefully using elegant gold wrapping paper and red ribbons. I purchased at a stationery shop for another $5. Honestly, once everything was packaged together, it looked quite nice. Respectable, even attractive. Late that afternoon, I brought the gifts to Rebecca's house wearing my warmest smile. "Mom, thank goodness you're here. Let me see everything," she said impatiently while grabbing the shopping bags. I watched her expression slowly shift as she unpacked each item. "Mom, what kind of purse is this?" "A brown leather handbag," I answered pleasantly. "It turned out lovely, didn't it? Look at the stitching and details." Rebecca turned the purse over several times, clearly searching for a luxury brand label. "Mom, this isn't Italian leather. This is from Sintra Varieties. It's still leather," I replied calmly, keeping my smile in place. "And the color matches almost everything. I'm sure Mrs. Miller will love it." She grabbed the tie next. "And this? Mom, where did you even buy this?" "It's a very elegant tie for Mr. Miller. Blue is a classic executive color, don't you think?" "Mom, this costs less than $20. The price tag is still attached." Rebecca's face was becoming redder by the second. "And these flowers?" I specifically asked for white orchids. "Chrysanthemums are much more cheerful," I explained. "And they last much longer, too." At that moment, David entered the room after hearing the irritation in Rebecca's voice. "What's going on?" "My mother bought cheap gifts for your parents," Rebecca snapped while holding up the purse as though it were evidence in a criminal investigation. David looked through the items with visible disgust. "Mrs. Thompson," he said coldly, "my parents are going to notice immediately that these are low-quality products. This is embarrassing." Embarrassing. There was that word again. "I'm sorry," I said softly, pretending to feel ashamed. I honestly thought the affection behind the gifts mattered more than the price tag. But if you really dislike everything, perhaps I could try returning them. "There's no time for that now, Mom," Rebecca nearly shouted. "They arrive tomorrow morning." "Well," I replied while maintaining my smile, "then I suppose you'll just have to explain that the gifts were chosen by me. You can tell them they came from your husband's classless nurse mother-in-law who wasn't considered good enough to attend Christmas." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Rebecca and David exchanged glances, both clearly realizing that I was no longer behaving like the obedient, endlessly understanding mother they were used to manipulating. "Mom, you're acting strange," Rebecca finally said carefully. "Am I?" I answered calmly. "Well, it's awkward. I'll leave you to organize everything," I said while heading toward the door. "I'm sure you'll find the perfect way to explain the situation to your sophisticated guests." I walked out of their house feeling lighter than I had in years. Instead of spending the $800 or $1,000 they had expected me to waste, I had spent less than $100. And somehow, I had still managed to give Rebecca exactly what she deserved. Affordable gifts for people who had taught her to feel ashamed of the woman who sacrificed everything for her. The following day, around lunchtime, my phone rang again. It was Rebecca, and for the first time in years, the tone in her voice was completely unfamiliar. She sounded desperate. "Mom, you need to come over here right now." "What happened, sweetheart?" I asked calmly. "David's parents arrived this morning, and they didn't like the gifts." I leaned back comfortably on the couch. "Oh," Mrs. Miller said the purse looked fake, and Mr. Miller barely even unfolded the tie before putting it aside. "Now, they think that we don't have sophisticated taste." Didn't have sophisticated taste. Life really did have a sense of irony. "And what exactly would you like me to do about that, Rebecca?" "You need to come here and explain that you were the one who picked everything out. Just say you don't understand expensive gifts and bought what you personally thought looked nice. Please, Mom. They can't think we're ordinary people." Ordinary people. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. "Rebecca, sweetheart," I said, "you already explained very clearly that I wasn't welcome at your Christmas celebration because I supposedly lacked enough class to be around David's parents. Remember?" "Mom, that was different." "And now you want me to come over there, accept blame for the cheap presents, and rescue your reputation with your in-laws? Please, Mom, just this once." "No." The word came out calm, firm, and final. Honestly, even I was surprised by how easy it felt to say it. "What do you mean, no?" Rebecca shouted. "It means exactly that," I replied calmly. "I'm not coming. You already made it clear that I'm not wanted there. Remember? According to you, I would ruin the sophisticated atmosphere. So figure things out with your refined in-laws on your own. As far as you're concerned, I apparently no longer exist." "Mom, you can't do this to me." But I'd already ended the call. And for the first time in 4 years, I hung up on my daughter while smiling. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty or anxious, but because I was experiencing something unfamiliar and strangely wonderful. Freedom. For the first time in years, I had told my daughter no, and the world hadn't collapsed because of it. In fact, I felt better than I had in a very long time. Still, something continued bothering me. I had stopped the money. I had refused to remain the obedient mother who sacrificed everything without question. But there was still one final connection tying me to Rebecca. Inheritance. The following morning, I called the law office that had handled my divorce nearly 10 years earlier. The receptionist managed to schedule an appointment with Dr. Smith for 2 o'clock that afternoon. "Mrs. Thompson," he said warmly when I entered his office, "it's been quite a while. What can I do for you today?" "Dr. Martinez, I need to prepare a will." He immediately picked up a notepad and pen. "Of course. It's always wise to organize these matters in advance. I assume you'd like to leave your estate to your daughter, Rebecca." Actually, no. He looked up from the paper, visibly surprised. No, no, I repeated firmly. I want all my assets divided equally between charitable organizations. The Municipal Children's Hospital, San Antonio Nursing Home, and the Cancer League. For a moment, Dr. Smith simply stared at me, clearly trying to process what I had just said. Mrs. Thompson, may I ask whether something happened between you and your daughter? Because this is a very drastic decision, a very cruel one. I finished for him with a bitter laugh. Doctor, 3 days ago my daughter informed me that I was not welcome at her Christmas celebration because I supposedly lacked enough class to be around her in-laws. Those same in-laws have been enjoying her luxurious house, imported car, and expensive lifestyle, things she could never have afforded without my financial support. He quietly wrote something down. I understand, he said carefully, and this is a final decision, completely final. I leaned forward slightly. I want the will to make it absolutely clear that Rebecca Thompson Miller is intentionally excluded from receiving any inheritance whatsoever. $0. Zero property. Nothing. And if she ever attempts to contest it, I want this document airtight. Dr. Smith nodded while continuing to write notes. I can certainly arrange that. We'll need to include language confirming that you are fully competent mentally and that this choice is conscious, voluntary, and deliberate. Exactly. There will be additional legal fees for a will this detailed, he explained. Approximately $500. That's perfectly fine. And honestly, it truly was. After all, I had just freed up $2,400 every month by ending the financial support Rebecca had taken for granted for years. $500 was a small price to ensure my daughter would never benefit from the savings I had spent my entire life building. May I ask roughly how much the estate is worth? He asked professionally. I had already calculated everything the previous evening. My savings account contains approximately $85,000. My retirement plan should be worth around $60,000. My apartment is fully paid off and currently valued at about $120,000. I also have a $50,000 life insurance policy. I paused briefly. So altogether, a little over $300,000. $300,000. Money I had accumulated through decades of exhausting shifts, personal sacrifices, and living modestly while constantly putting others before myself. $300,000 Rebecca fully expected would eventually become hers someday. She had no idea she had personally destroyed her own financial future with her arrogance. And you're absolutely certain about this? Dr. Smith asked one final time. Doctor, I answered quietly, I've worked as a nurse for 32 years. I've watched families destroy themselves over money. I've seen children only appear when they needed financial help. I've seen relatives treated like personal banks instead of human beings. I looked directly at him. My daughter turned me into exactly that, a personal bank. And personal banks are not meant to be loved or respected. They're simply used. Dr. Smith finished writing and slowly nodded. Very well. I'll prepare the paperwork immediately. Everything should be ready by Friday. Perfect. While I walked out his office, I felt as though I had just made the smartest decision of my entire life. Rebecca had taught me something painful but important. To her, love only mattered when it came attached to money. Fine. Now she was going to learn that disrespect also came with a price. Friday afternoon, I returned to the office to officially sign the documents. Dr. Smith had prepared everything flawlessly. The will explicitly stated that Rebecca Thompson Miller was entirely excluded from receiving any inheritance due to a long-term pattern of financial exploitation and repeated disrespect toward the testator. Done, he announced once I signed the final page. The will is now legally registered and fully valid. Would you like a copy? I'd like 2 copies, I replied. One for my apartment and another for my safety deposit box at the bank. When I returned home carrying the documents, I felt completely renewed. In just 1 week, I had finally severed every financial tie connecting me to a daughter who had spent years treating me like an unlimited source of money rather than a mother deserving love and respect. Ashamed of me, I kept 1 copy of the will inside my dresser drawer, among my other important documents, and I placed the second copy in the bank safety deposit box on Monday. What surprised me most was how much better I slept. For the first time in years, I no longer carried that constant anxiety about whether my money would be enough to cover both my expenses and hers. I no longer lay awake worrying about whether she would call again, asking for just one more small favor that would quietly drain another few $100s from me. Over the next 2 weeks, I experienced a level of peace I hadn't felt in years. I woke up, went to work, came home, and the money I earned stayed mine. I started making plans for myself. Maybe a trip to the mountains in spring. Maybe replacing my old car with something newer. Maybe even renovating my apartment a little. I bought new clothes for myself. Nothing extravagant, but nice pieces that made me feel human again. I started going to the beauty salon once a month. Small pleasures I had denied myself for years while funding my daughter's lifestyle. Rebecca didn't call once during those 2 weeks. She was probably too busy hosting her in-laws and maintaining the illusion that she was financially independent. Or maybe she was still angry about the cheap gifts incident and my refusal to take responsibility for it. Either way, I didn't care. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't care whether my daughter was upset with me or not. She had taught me that my only purpose was to be used. So now she was going to learn what it felt like when I could no longer be used. The will remained locked safely in the bank vault, patiently waiting for the moment Rebecca would eventually realize that every insult, every humiliation, every time she treated me like I was invisible unless she needed money, had a price attached to it. A total of $300,000. And strangely enough, I felt no remorse at all. 2 months passed since that Christmas conversation. 2 months of peace. 2 months of sleeping properly. 2 months of not worrying whether my bank account would fall into the red because I was supporting 2 separate households. I was in the middle of a shift to the hospital when my phone vibrated. Rebecca. I stepped outside into the parking lot during my break, taking a deep breath of the cool February air before answering. Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded different this time. Not the usual tone of superiority I had grown used to over the years. Something else was there now. Desperation. Hi, Rebecca. How are you? Mom, I need to talk to you about something, the money. Last month's transfer didn't go into my account. So it had finally begun. I had wondered how long it would take her to notice the tap had been shut off. What transfer, dear? I asked calmly. Mom, you know exactly what transfer I mean. The $2,100 you always send. I thought there was a problem with the bank, but it's February 7th and nothing has arrived. Oh, that transfer, I said slowly. I canceled it. Silence. A long, heavy silence stretched through the phone line. What do you mean you canceled it? I canceled the automatic transfer, Rebecca. The same day you told me I didn't have enough class to attend your family's Christmas. Mom, that has nothing to do with. Nothing to do with it. I interrupted softly. Of course it does. From your perspective, it's perfectly fine to humiliate me and still expect me to fund your life as if nothing happened. Mom, you can't do this. You know we rely on that money. Rely on my money, yes. I corrected. Not appreciate it. Not respect it. Just rely on it. As if it were something you were entitled to. Rebecca, you're 32 years old. You're married to a man with a good job. Why are you still depending on money from a classless nurse? It's not like that, Mom. No, I said. Then explain it to me. Because from where I stand, for the past 4 years, I've been nothing more than a personal bank account you could withdraw from whenever it suited you, while simultaneously treating me like I didn't belong in your life. I heard her take a sharp breath on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was louder, more frantic. Mom, you don't understand. We have obligations. The mortgage, David's car, credit cards. Without your help, we can't cover everything. And why is that my problem, Rebecca? What do you mean, why is it your problem? I'm your daughter. You're my daughter when you need money, I said quietly. But when it comes to respect, inclusion, or basic decency, I'm just an embarrassment. Mom, stop it. You're twisting everything. Twisting it. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Rebecca, you literally told me I wasn't allowed at Christmas because I don't have enough class. Your husband said my profession didn't match their successful executive world. What exactly am I twisting? That was a misunderstanding. No, it wasn't. I replied firmly. You were very clear. Clear, and I had understood the message perfectly. Mom, listen, Rebecca continued quickly. We can talk about this properly. Come to my house. Let's have lunch together like old times. Like old times. Like old times when I also paid the restaurant bill, I said calmly. No, Rebecca, I'm not coming to your house anymore. And I'm not financing anything for you anymore. You are adults. Figure out. Mom, her voice cracked into something close to shouting. You can't just stop helping us. We're going to fall into debt. Then ask David's refined parents for help? I replied evenly. Or those successful executives you admire so much. You know, the people with enough class. Unlike me. You know they won't lend us money. And I should. I asked. Why exactly? Because I'm easy to manipulate? Because I'm your mother only when it benefits you? I am your mother when you need money, Rebecca. The rest of the time, I'm just an embarrassment who isn't allowed at your important family occasions. Mom, this isn't fair. It isn't fair. My voice rose slightly. After 4 years of draining my finances, after humiliating me in front of your husband, after excluding me from Christmas with my own family, you're telling me I'm the one being unfair? You're exaggerating, she insisted. Am I? I answered sharply. Rebecca, over the last 4 years you received more than $120,000 from my account. $120,000 I earned working 60-hour weeks. Silence. $120,000, she repeated in a low whisper. Yes, I calculated it. If you want, I can send you every statement so you can see it yourself. Mom, I didn't realize it was that much. Of course you did, I said firmly. You just didn't care. As long as the money kept coming in, it didn't matter to you that I was exhausting myself to maintain your lifestyle. That's not true. It is exactly true, and it's finished. Not another cent will leave my account for you. Ever again. Mom, you can't do this. If you stop helping, we'll lose the house. Then you'll learn to live within your means like adults. Mom, please. Her voice softened in a desperation. I'm begging you. And that was when she said the sentence I will never forget, the one that confirmed I had made the right decision. If you don't start sending the money again, I will never speak to you again. Never. You'll lose your daughter forever. Lose my daughter? I repeated quietly, as if I hadn't already lost her years ago. The moment she decided money mattered more than respect. Rebecca, I said calmly, if the only reason you speak to me is money, then I lost my daughter a long time ago. The difference is now I finally see it clearly. And I hung up. I stood there in the hospital parking lot, staring at the phone in my hand for several long seconds. 4 years of manipulation, reduced to a single threat. Send money or lose your daughter. She had made her choice, and so had I. The following week, Rebecca called 3 more times. On the first call I answered, curious whether her tone had changed. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, and you're right about some things. We didn't treat you well, and I'm sorry. But you can't punish us financially for it. Punish you financially, I repeated slowly, as if I had a lifelong obligation to fund 2 adults who are ashamed of me. When not ashamed of you. Yes, you are, I said flatly. You're so ashamed of me that you didn't even want me at your own Christmas. Mom, that was a misunderstanding. We can fix it. We can have a new Christmas, just the 3 of us. I don't want a replacement Christmas, Rebecca, and I don't want to be treated like a servant you occasionally reward with fake kindness. Then what do you want? She asked. What do I have to do for you to help us again? What do I want? For the first time in years, she was asking me that. I want you to learn to live on your own money. I want you to grow up. And most of all, I want you to leave me alone. That's cruel, she said. Cruel was using me as a personal bank for 4 years. Cruel was excluding me from Christmas. Cruel was your husband telling me I didn't have class. I'm just stopping being convenient. I ended the call. 2 days later, the phone rang again, but this time it was David. Mrs. Thompson, I need to speak with you. Speak, David. You can't just stop helping Rebecca like this. It's irresponsible of you. Irresponsible. A grown man in his 30s was calling me irresponsible for refusing to pay his bills. David, I said calmly, you are not my responsibility. You are both adults, but you always helped before. Rebecca counts on that money, David insisted. And you've never even considered what it would be like for her to live without it. You've never tried to build a budget based on your income alone, not ours. It's not that simple, he added quickly. Yes, it is, I replied firmly. It's very simple. You earn money, and you spend only what you earn. That's what everyone else does. You're just being vindictive because of that Christmas incident. This is petty. Petty, I repeated, stunned. After insulting me, excluding me, and using me financially, you're calling me petty? David, I said coldly, you told me I don't have enough class to be around your family. Very well. People who supposedly don't have class should not be funding the lifestyle of people who think they do. Problem solved. You're twisting everything, he snapped. I'm not twisting anything, I answered. I'm simply stopping being a fool. And then I hung up. I blocked his number immediately afterward. A week later, Rebecca called again. She was crying. Mom, we're going to lose the house. The bank sent a notice. If we don't pay the overdue amount by the end of the month, they'll foreclose. For a moment, I felt a sharp sting in my chest. It wasn't exactly pity. It was something more distant, like watching a sad story on the news about people you don't personally know. I'm sorry to hear that. Rebecca, I said quietly. Mom, please, can you help us one last time? Just this once. I promise. No. Mom, please. It's only $8,000 to bring everything current. $8,000. For months of what I used to send them. Money I already had. Money that could temporarily fix their situation. Rebecca, I said carefully, if I give you that $8,000 today, how long before you need more again? It won't happen again. We've learned our lesson. What lesson exactly? I asked. That you can mistreat me because I'll always step in and fix your financial problems? That's not what this is. That's exactly what it is. My voice stayed steady. You humiliated me. You excluded me. You treated me like a servant for years, and still expected me to pay for your life. Mom, I can't lose the house, she sobbed. Then ask David's refined parents, I said, or sell the imported car, or get a second job. Do what adults do when they can't afford their lifestyle. They won't help us. And why should I? I asked. Because I'm easier to exploit than them? Because you're my mother. Listen carefully, Rebecca, I said, my tone now final. You made a choice when you decided I wasn't good enough for your family. You made a choice when you allowed your husband to insult me. You made a choice when you treated me like a financial resource instead of a person. Mom, please. Now I'm making mine. It is no longer my problem if you lose the house. You have a husband and in-laws who you considered more important than me. Ask them. I don't exist for you anymore, I added quietly. That's what you taught me. Mom, don't do this to me. Goodbye, Rebecca. Good luck. I ended the call and blocked her number as well. 3 years have passed since that final conversation. 3 years of peace. With the $2,400 that no longer left my account every month, I completely rebuilt my life. I renovated my apartment from top to bottom. New furniture, freshly painted walls, new flooring. It finally became a home that belonged entirely to me, designed by me, paid for by me. I traveled to the mountains in Colorado twice. I visited the Grand Canyon. I went on a Caribbean cruise the year after. For so long, I had dreamed of traveling, but there was never enough money left after supporting them. Now, there was. I bought a brand new car, a 2024 blue Honda Civic that I fell in love with the moment I saw it. I paid in cash, using savings I had built over 2 years. I even retired at 61, earlier than planned, after realizing my pension and savings were enough to live comfortably without working 60-hour weeks. Sometimes I meet acquaintances in town who ask about Rebecca. How is your daughter? I haven't seen her in a while. My answer is always the same, said with a calm smile. I don't have a daughter. At first, people are confused. They think I'm joking, but eventually they understand I'm serious, and they stop asking. I've heard through others that Rebecca and David did lose the house. They moved into a smaller apartment. David sold the imported car. Rebecca went back to full-time work. I don't feel sympathy. I don't feel regret. I don't feel nostalgia. I feel peace. Yesterday, while organizing my documents, I found an old photograph of Rebecca as a little girl, smiling with missing front teeth. For a moment, something tightened in my chest. Then I remembered her voice on the phone. You don't have enough class to be at our Christmas. I tore the photo into pieces and threw it away. This morning I woke up, made my coffee, and sat on the balcony of my renovated apartment while planning my next trip. I'm thinking about Europe now. I've always wanted to see Paris. At 61, I finally understood something important. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, by value, by presence, by being wanted for who you are, not for what you provide. I don't have a biological family in my life anymore, but I do have a good life. A life that belongs to me, paid for with my own money, shaped by my own choices, live on my own terms. Rebecca once taught me I wasn't good enough for her world. I learned she wasn't good enough for mine, and I am perfectly fine with that.